Hello everyone, this is Forrest at The Complete Angler. We're coming back to you with another tying video, and today we're going to be tying some Albie flies. Right now we have the Northeast Albie season, and we're going to be tying up two of my favorite patterns. The first one is going to be Bonito Bunny. I tie these in a couple different colors and sizes, and then we're going to be going over the Surf Candy. Both of these flies are easy to tie, minimal materials, so you can stock your box for this Albie season. We're going to start off with our Bonito Bunny, and for about the 2 to 3 inch size, I like to use the Gamakatsu SL12S short, which I have in my vise now. For anything smaller, you can tie them down to 1.5 inches. I like to use the Gamakatsu SL12S in a size 4. So we're going to start off tying in our thread. We have a mono thread, 0.006. And our first material, we're going to tie at the back point of the hook, is going to be a 20-pound mono. What the 20-pound mono does is it creates an anti-fouling point, so we don't have to worry about our rabbit strip tail fouling around the bend of the hook. So we're going to tie in one side of the 20-pound mono. We're going to double it over and tie in the other leg. We're going to adjust the length on our mono. I want a small loop hanging off the back, basically in line where the hook bend is. We're going to wrap back down the hook to where we tied in the mono, and we're going to add pearl clip crystal flash. I'm going to grab about 3 strands of crystal flash, tie it in on my side. I'm going to double it over and tie in the remaining on the far side to get even coverage. Now we're going to grab our rabbit strip. This is just a standard white rabbit strip. You can also use tan as well as pink. I'm going to tie in my tail. This is the Zonker rabbit strip, and we're going to follow that up with the body, which is going to be our crosscut rabbit strip. You want to make sure when you're tying in the crosscut, you can see that the fibers are going to be pointing one way. And when I wrap them around the hook, I want those fibers splayed back. Forward, it's not going to come out as pretty. Once I tie my cross cut, I'm going to advance my thread to the bend of the hook. I'm going to be palmering the cross-cut rabbit strip forward to the eye of the hook. You want the wraps to be touching. And you can notice after each palmer, I stroke the fibers back so we don't trap any of the rabbit fur. I'm going to cinch down my rabbit strip, making sure not to trap too many fibers. We're going to create a small bump for the head with our thread. and we're going to secure our thread. The next step, I'm going to add some eyes. This is size 1/4 inch in silver. And we're going to adhere the eyes to the side of the fly, each side with some Z-men. I'm going to start on my side. Making sure that our tape eyes are nice and close to the eye of the hook. I want to make sure my eyes are nice and aligned. And we're ready to finish off this fly. We're going to take a UV resin. You could use Gulf, you could use Solar Res, as well as Loon, and we want a thick viscosity. So any of the thick variations will help. What we're going to be doing with our resin is we're going to be building up a head, and we're going to do this in steps. The first step, I'm going to seal the gap in between each eye, both on the top and the bottom. Making sure not to get too much resin by the eye of the hook. And we're going to zap that with our UV light. I want to make sure that's nice and cured before I start my second coat. So we're good to go on the second coat. The second coat, we're going to be putting it over the eyes and working it around the eyes of the fly to make a small bump for the head. This is where that thicker viscosity comes in handy because you can build up a lot more resin compared to a thin viscosity. Having a rotary function on the vise certainly helps. When I spin it with the rotary, you don't have any areas that are going to droop down with the resin. And I can get even coverage as well as a cylindrical head. While I'm using the rotary function of the vise and making sure everything's cylindrical, I'm going to hit it with my UV light and cure it up. Once it's cured, it's ready to fish. It's going to be a nice durable head. One great thing I love about the Bonito Bunny is the amount of motion on this fly. You could throw it into a feeding pot of Albies. You could either strip it or just let it sink, and it's going to flutter on the drop. A lot of Albies I've caught that way seems to be on the drop. So, highly versatile fly, easy to tie. Next up, we're going to be working on the surf candy. Next up, we're going to be tying the surf candy. The most common size I like when they're on really small white bait and when they're being very finicky is the Gamakatsu SL113H in a size 8. It's a nice small and stout hook. And for our bigger bay anchovy patterns, I tie them all the way up to a size 2. This is going to be a smaller length. We're going to start off with the size 8. I'm going to tie in my thread, which is the same thread, 0.006 mono. I'm going to advance the thread down to the bend of the hook, just to lay down a base. I'm going to advance it forward. For the material on our surf candy, we're going to be using for our flash blend. This is the UV anchovy color for our top. For the bottom, we're going to be using flash blend in the UV white. I like the flash blend because it has the flash built in already. We don't have to add any lateral lines. And if you keep it sparse, that's going to be more ideal. It's more translucent bait fish effect. So don't worry about length of our blend to start. We're going to take a little chunk, less is more, and we're going to start off by tying our UV anchovy on the top side of the hook. We want to do a couple wraps to gather it and then use our thumb to distribute it on the top half of the hook. Once I'm confident that it's seated, with a couple tight wraps, I'm going to trim it off. This is where the rotary vise comes in handy because we're going to be working on the underside of our fly with our UV white. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to tie in our UV white. And we're going to distribute this on the underside of the hook using our thumb. A couple tight wraps. We're going to trim off the white. Make sure there's no material around the eye of the hook. What we can always do is take it out of the vise and make sure that our fibers go around the hook bends so we have even coverage. So that's the base of our fly. That's really it. We're going to finish off the head and grab our thick resin. Before I add my UV resin, I'm going to adhere my eyes. These are going to be the same eyes that we used on the Bonito Bunny. 1/4 inch silver eyes. And even on the smaller profile surf candies, I like to use a small eye. I feel like it's a trigger point for a lot of Albies and Bonito, is a large eye. And we're going to use a little bit of Z-Ment just to adhere them on, so that way they stay in place when I start to work with my UV resin. Make sure our eyes are straight on there and even. Now we're going to grab our thick resin. And to build up a body, it's easy to do it in steps. So in our first step, We're just going to use enough to fill in the gap around the eyes and saturate the material. We want to work this resin into the Farrar blend. As you can see, I'm holding the Farrar blend back. What this is going to do is it's going to create our profile, so we could either go for a wider profile or a slim profile if we pull it back even more. So I'm going for a fairly small body on the fly, so I'm confident with that. I'm going to hit it with my UV light. Now that it's cure, I'm going to start to build up the body. This is where the rotary really comes in handy, because we can create a cylindrical body with our resin as long as the rotary is spinning. So I'm going to coat my eyes and start to turn the rotary vise slow. And we're going to create our body. We're going to add a little bit of resin, nice and slow. You don't want to add too much. As you spin the rotary, it distributes the resin around evenly and you start to get a cylindrical profile. We make sure we have nice even coverage. Spin it a few times just to make sure everything's cylindrical. And while we're spinning it, we're going to hit it with our UV light. Now that it's set, one last step I like to do is I like to extend a little bit beyond the bend of the hook. And to make sure that these fibers don't foul when I'm casting, I like to add a little bit of UV resin to the back of the fly. Just going to add a small amount just to saturate the fibers. Again, we're going to pull them back for our blend, and we're going to finish it off with our UV light. Adding this little amount of UV resin off the tail ensures that our fly isn't going to foul when we're casting. Now that we've finished that step, we're going to trim our tail. We'll start by creating the length that we want. And then we're going to add a little taper, cutting at an angle to create more of a baitfish profile. This is a nice and easy version of the surf candy. You can see it's nice and translucent, especially when it hits the water. We have a nice little taper in the back. Real bait fishy, super durable fly, and it catches a lot of albies. We hope you guys enjoyed this video. Good luck out there during this albie season, and we hope to see you on the water.